Vibes of India. I'm Janvi, and as we enter new financial year 2022-23, I'm sitting with Chartered Accountant and Tax Advisor Yash Shah. We will be discussing about what are the financial things to look forward to in this year. What are the financial concepts that people in our 20s should know? And what are the ways in which you can save tax legally? To discuss all such things, let's start the conversation with CA Yash Shah. So up next, let's discuss about what are the tax implications that should be considered while buying a house from an NRI.
From an NRI, okay. So Janvi, this is also a very prevalent question, because we are seeing a lot of such transactions that are happening, especially in Gujarat, because we have a lot of NRI population. A lot of people who had invested in land many years back moved to the US or London and abroad. The wealth has grown significantly in all these years. And now they would like to, obviously being settled now in abroad, they may like to take an exit in India. So now we are seeing a lot of such selling interest from the NRIs. And obviously these pieces of like parcels of land or homes are being bought by resident Indians. So what typically happens is there is a resident Indian buyer and there is a non-resident seller. Now what typically happens is that when me or you want to buy a piece of land or a house, what the income tax regulations say, that when a resident buyer purchases from a resident seller, you need to deduct taxes. You need to deduct taxes from the payment that you make to the seller, amounting to 1%. So say if you've bought a house of 100 rupees, you have to give him 99 only. 1 rupee you have to credit it to the government. Towards his TDS. This 1 rupee will be reimbursed by the seller against his tax return. He will claim it as a rebate or a tax credit. This is primarily for the government to ensure that all the transactions are reported. So what happens is, a lot of times people sell their properties, houses, don't file the returns. So TDS is a typical way to plug the transactions, to ensure that whatever is being transacted and earned by way of capital gains by the seller is being reported to the government. So by way of TDS this happens. But what happens when a non-resident seller comes in? Since he is not living in India, section 195 of the Income Tax Act states that whenever you buy a house from a non-resident seller, this TDS rate shoots up from 1% to 20%. So what happens is, this often tends to become a deal breaker. First of all, the non-resident, say, there are a lot of times what happens, he never visits India. He, from an ancestral point of view, he is a non-resident in India, but he doesn't have anything to do in India. So for many years he would not have filed his returns or anything, and then suddenly this 20% tax is deducted, paid to the government, and then he has to claim this 20% from the government against his return file. But the reason is because the property is situated in India. Any income that is earned from sale of such property has to be taxed in India. So has to be offered for tax in India. And the typical capital gains tax rate is 20%. So the TDS rate is also 20%. So this often tends to be a deal breaker, because what happens in case of say a US seller or a seller from United Kingdom, because he is a resident over there, he might have to pay these taxes over there as well. So our human psychology is that we try to, unless we are very formalized with the tax system, we try to pay taxes in avoid paying taxes in both the countries. So what happens is, as a buyer, you have to be very careful. The first and the foremost thing is, if you are dealing with a non-resident seller, please call up a chartered accountant and find the exact rate of tax. Because the rate of tax depends on the value of the property also. Say if the value of the property is above 5 crores, the rate of tax deduction at source jumps to even 28%. Depends on the surcharge and all. So you will have to know the exact rate of TDS that is required to be done. Because if you pay the entire 100 rupees, without deducting that 20 or 28 rupees, that liability of 20 or 28 will come on to you.
Okay.
As the
so
buyer.
to avoid that, it's better to bring a CA.
Bring the CA beforehand, just get the exact rate of tax. There are certain ways to bring down this tax rate. So the non-resident seller has to apply to the income tax officer, income tax office, stating that his tax showing what his tax liability is going to be on this sale, and my TDS does not warrant to be so high. But he has to prove and get a certificate towards it, that and give it to the buyer, that hey buyer, please don't deduct 28% tax. This is only my tax, but and I've got a legal certificate. I got a tax certificate from the tax department, and but the buyer needs to have that certificate beforehand before he decides to short deduct the TDS.
And many times people are not aware of this.
Not aware of this. Yeah, absolutely. So the most important thing while purchasing a property is the correct rate of TDS that is required to be, because which is very high, and you know, if this TDS thing is brought in after, because you know, you tend to get a payment time period cycle of a 6 to 7 months, and this TDS discussions say come in after 3 or 4 months, it becomes kind of a deal breaker. So please discuss this beforehand, so that this transaction can be concluded smoothly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.